VRChat, the next frontier. These are the experiences from Gunter's universe. His continuing mission, to seek out and connect with VR devs and passionate enthusiasts, to discuss theories, beliefs, and rhetoric of all kind, and to boldly go where no show has ever gone before.
Back to Gunter's Universe, everyone. I am your host, Gunter Thompson, and this is the show where we discuss VR and all things geek, as well as interview some of the movers and shakers in the tech industry. On tonight's show, we're going to do a deep dive into cryptocurrency. We're going to go beyond Bitcoin and into the tech behind it, the blockchain. And we're going to talk about things such as Ethereum, smart contracts, ICOs, Decentraland, Strict Zero, all kinds of great stuff. And with us here to help us learn and navigate this often puzzling and wildly fascinating technology is two people. We've got Brady Mckenna. What's up? AKA McMuse.
Yay. How's everyone doing?
We're doing great. And we have over here to my left, Nima Zeighami. He is, he's a lot of things in VR, but mainly he has created a Slack group for those that were part of the Decentraland's ICO that got caught up in all this drama, got screwed. Well, at least that's the opinions of some people, and we're going to talk all about that later in the show. But quickly, McMuse, tell people a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, for one, I'm a musician, which is what everyone here probably knows me as, but I also work in the blockchain and distributed ledger industry, and I've been a consultant since about 2012. I got into it early 2011 and just fell completely down the rabbit hole. And I started a consulting company and was just doing independent consulting for law firms and individuals, and then I started with Coinbase, actually, and was on their support operations team for quite a while, and then slowly made my way to the regulatory compliance team there and really dug into the regulatory side of the industry. That was really my end goal, especially with doing consulting, because I wanted to see what is and what is not actually happening. And it's difficult unless you're actually really diving in on that level and seeing how far that's actually going in terms of the way laws and regulations really are. And now, after leaving Coinbase just the middle of this year, I started with District 0x, which a friend of mine, Joe Ergo, started, and he is really passionate in the space as well, and building distributed business models and just decentralized tech in general. And District 0x is actually, in a nutshell, it's a deployment platform for deploying marketplaces that are built on top of blockchains and using digital currencies. And that's where I'm at right now.
What does that mean? We're going to find out.
So, yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Right now. We're going to unpack this. Some people are like, "What's a Bitcoin?" Well, maybe. Hopefully, everybody knows what a Bitcoin is. And before Nima, I ask you a little bit more about your background, I forgot to welcome Bob, my co-host, aka Cause and Effects. What up, my friend?
Hey, everybody. Not much. Bob. Just another wonderful day in the metaverse.
That's right. And where you are in Boston, I'm in South Florida. Nima, where are you at?
I'm in Seattle.
And
nice.
McMuse, where are you at? I forgot where you're.
I am in New Mexico right now.
Right, New Mexico. All kinds of time zones. That's really cool.
Yeah, like
and Bob, you have a little bit of knowledge.
Of the country.
I guess so.
Yeah, really.
Great.
And Bob, you own
latency.
Yeah, it works just fine. Right? It's weird. I don't know how this technology works, right? It's magic. Well, I kind of guess I do know how it works. You've dabbled in cryptocurrency. So you're coming at this at an angle of somebody that's been a buyer and seller, right?
And miner.
That's a key point of things. Cool. And Nima, tell us a little bit about yourself. You are more than just running a Slack about Decentraland's ICO, but also you do tons of VR stuff. In fact, I don't know how you have as many hours in the day to do what you do. Maybe just rattle off a few things.
Yeah, so I started, I used to work at the Apple Store back when I was like 18. After I left that, I started doing consulting in the tech space, and that's kind of evolved a lot. Most recently, I've rebranded to a company that is now called Agency XR. It's still my same consulting firm, but I've moved over to consulting for almost exclusively VR and AR projects. Did some stuff for Starbucks, GMC, VR World, New York, which is the biggest VR arcade in all of North America. Super cool stuff. Worked with Exit Reality. They're really cool. I run the Doubt Reality blog. I co-founded a company called VR Sports that makes a game called Smack It Ball. It's on Steam. I co-founded the Kronos Group in Seattle, which is the group that handles OpenGL, OpenXR, and we're really about promoting like open standards and making sure that our community's using those to the fullest extent possible. And recently I fell down the Decentraland rabbit hole. So that's what I've been doing most recently. It's been kind of a crazy ride.
Yeah,
definitely. So yes, the amount of expertise here is great. We're going to have a great time talking to you guys. If you guys out there have questions for these people, just shout them out. We'd like to hear them. Let's start though with a "What is Bitcoin?" video, just to get people kind of caught up with what Bitcoin is, in case you don't know.
Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the first decentralized digital currency. Bitcoins are digital coins you can send through the internet. Compared to other alternatives, Bitcoins have a number of advantages. Bitcoins are transferred directly from person to person via the net, without going through a bank or clearinghouse. This means that the fees are much lower, you can use them in every country, your account cannot be frozen, and there are no prerequisites or arbitrary limits. Let's look at how it works. Bitcoins are generated all over the internet by anybody running a free application called a Bitcoin miner. Mining requires a certain amount of work for each block of coins. This amount is automatically adjusted by the network such that Bitcoins are always created at a predictable and limited rate. Your Bitcoins are stored in your digital wallet, which might look familiar if you use online banking. When you transfer Bitcoins, an electronic signature is added. After a few minutes, the transaction is verified by a miner and permanently and anonymously stored in the network. The Bitcoin software is completely open source and anybody can review the code. Bitcoin is changing finance the same way the web changed publishing. When everyone has access to a global market, great ideas flourish. Let's look at some examples of how Bitcoins are already used today. You can purchase.
Okay, I think that's enough of the video. That's a bit of an introduction. McNews, would you say that summarizes things very well, or what would you say Bitcoin is?
I do have a couple comments. Before I say anything, though, I will say that my comments are my own, my views are my own, and I think that's important. And nothing I say is investment advice. Take it with a grain of salt because things change.
But this is for entertainment purposes only, just in case.
Well, what I always tell people who want to invest is, if you're going to invest in any of this stuff, make sure it's disposable income, that if it goes to $0, you don't mind.
You don't care. Yeah, exactly.
That's the big thing that I hear, right?
With investing in general, really. That should be the rule. But there is one misconception that I would like to point out in the video. It is not actually anonymous because you're dealing with a public ledger, and it is very easy, unless you really, really know what you're doing with cryptography, it's next to impossible to truly be anonymous. It's a public ledger, and you're basically dealing with a public database that anybody can look at. And if you send someone a transaction, they see your wallet, they see your transactions. And so it's not necessarily anonymous. I think the correct term would be, what is it? Not necessarily anonymous, but you can... I forget. I'm looking for a specific word, and it's not coming to me.
The trail to your IP address, it comes right up to your IP address. It's there. It's stored in a record. It's not like a VPN that says, "Hey, we delete all the records after 24 hours." Like that's kind of cool to know for privacy.
Your wallet address is there, but it doesn't have your name attached to it.
Right. Unless you choose to, which is something you can actually do in some cases. But if you send someone a transaction, they see where it came from. They see all the transactions. So there is a level of anonymity, but it's not completely anonymous depending on how you're using it. So that is a slight misconception in the video.
Okay. And Nima, how would you describe Bitcoin in a nutshell?
Well, I mean, it's a digital asset that exists through exactly what they were talking about, like mining. But the interesting thing about it is that, like, unlike the digital assets in like my personal playthrough of, like, let's say Final Fantasy 15, these digital assets have value to people, and there's like marketplaces that trade them. And the fact that people want to spend money and convert their cash dollars to it is what makes it valuable. There's been some really interesting stuff these days. There's been a couple of articles that just came out that talked about how it's not really a currency, but it's also not really a security. It's not like either of those things. It's like this new thing. So cryptocurrency, you might just want to think of it as like a digital asset that some people think has value. I don't even want to make the claim that it has value for sure, because that's really up to you. So yeah, it's just digital assets that exist and can be transferred.
It gets taxed like a asset according to the U.S. government.
Right.
The IRS.
And like you use Coinbase Popular, it's not an exchange, is it? Or is it an exchange? They only do.
Coinbase is an
Is it
exchange.
considered an exchange? Because you don't exchange to a lot of other coins. Okay. But it's still an exchange. It's where you can connect your bank, credit card, or whatever, and buy Bitcoin, you can buy Ethereum, and you can buy Litecoin.
Yep. It's the
USD.
gateway into this whole ecosystem. It's an easy way. There's several of them that are out right now, and they all have different of these assets. It's interesting. Was there a question?
Yeah.
Question.
Right here.
Latency, it's hard to hear you, buddy.
Yeah, sorry, buddy.
Go.
So I had, 300 Bitcoin at the beginning.
It's hard to hear you, man.
2011.
I feel like there's a terrible story. You said you had 300 Bitcoin at the beginning. Yes, better, but louder would be good.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Boom, there you go.
Gotcha.
Okay, cool. So I watched Bitcoin, and I spent most of mine on VPN services, and I basically spent, like about 300 Bitcoin on VPN services, and I've watched the market grow.
Yeah.
What about us, those that have had it from the beginning and watch it grow to what, 6,000-7,000?
3 to 4.
300 about right now.
Yeah, it's about 4 or something. Yeah.
Okay,
Lots.
so I should go ahead and there's a building nearby that I can jump off of. That's where I should be at, right? I just want to make sure that I'm in it right.
We can't give that kind of advice either, but if I was in your case, I may be thinking the same. Yeah, I have my woes.
I will say this on that note. That's part of what Kaz was saying. Is really you got to be careful. You got to use disposable income if you're really looking at this as an investment. You got to be really careful, because a lot of people have lost it, and I'm an early adopter and have very little to show for it. Very much like you, because. I mean, you had to be lucky. I mean, there's kids that mined a bunch of it, went off to college, came back, forgot about their laptop, opened it up, and they're a millionaire now. And there's those situations. And then there's situations where people like focused too much on it, and they were trading the markets, and they lost a bunch. And I've lost a bunch. I've accidentally sent 300 Bitcoin in 2011 to some address that I accidentally typed in, and those are just gone forever. And that's another thing. That's a key to all this. Is we're used to this insulated financial system with banks where you can reverse transactions, and that's not a possibility with these blockchain assets. It's an irreversible transaction. That's like cash. You leave your wallet on the park bench, it's gone when someone takes it. You're not getting it back, and it's very much like cash for the internet in that regard. Anyway,
Recommend jumping off the building that I'm sitting on.
No, so I'm gonna give my version of the events.
Yeah, in VR.
I think that
I would never do
crypto.
that. I'm just being
Cool.
silly.
But for everyone, to that point, crypto
Nima.
goes in waves. Like the value goes up and down. There's always new currencies. There's new technologies. There's always a new thing happening to a project. Bitcoin just had a split. Now there's Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and they both exist. All these things happen, and they're new. And this whole thing is just a wave. And getting into crypto is being a surfer. and you got to just like know that wave and ride it the right way. And if you crash, just like hop back onto it. It happens to everyone. Literally every single person in crypto will lose something. And if they're not, they're probably not doing a good job of investing. So
you got to look at it like tuition for learning.
Straight up. So yeah,
you gotta
surf that wave. If you get into it, a loss isn't a permanent loss.
I appreciate you putting it in those terms. I know they're
still hard to hear you, but we got you. Latency, a little too quiet for us to. But we got you. And so the big thing is to only put in money that you're okay getting, losing or whatever, because you never know when the value of these things are going to change. It's really, nobody knows. This is one of the most interesting things in currency to happen in centuries, right? Or maybe since.
And definitely learn what public-private key encryption is and learn how to secure it properly, because that's the biggest way people lose, is just diving in and not really, just kind of being careless with way too much money. And that's happened to me. That's happened to people I know. And it happens to everyone. And like I said, you got to look at it like tuition for learning. And your goal is to keep your tuition costs as low as possible by not having too much at risk.
So Gunter, I had a thought over here. Actually,
so my batteries just died. Yeah, go ahead and share your thought, Lousy, while I change my batteries. I can still hear them.
Okay.
So, a little earlier in the conversation, I think Nima or McNews mentioned that Bitcoin is really just something that some people say have value, or say has value, making that clear. Sarah was pointing out that that's actually true of pretty much all currency, especially currency backed by a particular nation. It's just Bitcoin isn't backed by a nation. It's but U.S. currency may or may not be worth something to different people in the world, depending on what kind of currency.
Sure. Some people will argue that like being backed by a nation is a huge amount of value, because that's like military force behind your spending. So that's like, I would argue there's like a little bit of a difference there.
There definitely is. I think she was just making the point that the argument that it's only valuable to some people could be made for any digital currency.
It is a very abstract concept. Monetary value in general is a very abstract and human. It's a very human thing. I mean, we've made seashells into currency in the past, and now we're making digital assets. I mean, it's no different.
Then they started printing paper on paper, and people believed in that. After you didn't have to have gold, so it's been
Still
crazy.
do.
And credit cards is another faith. People hadn't got credit cards in the 70s and 80s. Not everybody accepted them. Is this real thing? But it opened up tons of opportunities, and I think Bitcoin and specifically the blockchain technology is going to do that. Nima, could you describe and tell us what the blockchain is?
Well, I mean, blockchain is effectively a public ledger of transactions in which people, as they're using the network and mining, the ledger gets bigger and bigger, and it kind of just grows out and is a public ledger of all the transactions that have been done within that blockchain specifically. And I do want to make the point that this is almost never brought up, especially these days, but blockchain is not the only way to cryptographically do things with currency. There's like a few new technologies that are super interesting. Blockchain is definitely the most popular. Blockchain has not even gotten close to reaching its limit, but it does have some inherent limits that I'm hoping that Vitalik and some other people in the community will be solving in the future.
It's Dogecoin.
Hey, Latency, go ahead and have a seat, buddy. We still can't hear you, and that's good enough for now. But so that's interesting. There's more than that's blockchain technology, because it's really what the blockchain is enabling, the public ledger, and it's enabling decentralization of whatever, a currency or digital asset, like you were calling it, which is anything. Could be your identity in the metaverse. I've heard people talk about that, and that's really interesting. Or your assets.
Anything.
I mean, it's really just we've moved from centralized siloed databases in Excel spreadsheets to new types of databases that are publicly shared, and that's really what the key difference right there.
What is Ethereum?
So Ethereum is just a new iteration of how to do this, but the big thing with Ethereum is it's a way to fuel smart contracts. And smart contracts are, they can really get abstract in terms of what you can do, but the easiest way to look at it is really because we're talking about digital assets, it makes it to where your digital assets can now be in a programmable environment. Like at this date, I would like this money to go to this address, or if this action happens on the network, I would like the money to split between these different addresses. Or in the case of crowd sales, you can actually have people send money to it and automatically send you a new asset in return. So it's just a way to program your money, really.
With things like smart contracts. Would you like to add to that, Nima?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please do.
I would say that besides that, which is 100% correct, I'd probably say is the biggest thing, being just a separate asset in general makes it have its own culture, its own group of people working on it, and just makes it its own thing, even things down to like the logo and like the naming scheme around how to do things with it. It's just fundamentally different, even though the core underlying blockchain idea isn't miles and miles different from Bitcoin. The cultures are very, very different. There's completely different people involved in both spaces, and it's its own thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a tribal type ecosystem that's currently developing, because, I mean, that's really what money causes. It causes a community that's based around a specific currency, and they have different ideals, different philosophies on things, and different viewpoints. And that's what you're seeing with all these different currencies, is different, really tribal like mentalities. And it's a very natural kind of development when you have new types of money emerge, and it's happened throughout history.
And you should think about it like this. If someone holds a ton of Ethereum tokens, for example, they're going to want people to buy Ethereum and to use Ethereum and transact with Ethereum, make Ethereum-based applications, because it increases, in theory, the value of the Ethereum they're holding. So there's like a pretty good reason why the whole tribal thing happens when it comes to crypto. It's specifically because of that. People want what they're doing to have value, and people using it is what gives it value.
Yeah, exactly. And value isn't just currency. It's like you said, it's these things, dApps, right? They call them developer apps, or no? Why is it dApps?
Decentralized.
Apps, which is like the key thing, in my opinion, about what gets me excited about these technologies. And Ethereum really seems to embrace that. Like, I'm attracted to Ethereum more because it's doing more than what Bitcoin's proving it, but Ethereum has the future that I'm really interested in.
Like he was saying, though, like he was saying, though, Nima was saying that there's different iterations of how to do these digital assets, and there are other ways to do smart contracts, and there are a lot of other projects working on it, and Ethereum's not even the only way to do it. It's actually fascinating, all the different types of ideas that are really springing up to do smart contracts and just programmatically distribute money and manage money, and not even money. You can put real world assets on it, because the U.S. has passed a lot of laws and regulatory framework that allow people to put real world assets onto a blockchain, and that's slowly but surely happening. And you're even getting people to create asset-backed digital currencies and equity crowdfunding, but like the SEC just kind of cracked down on a lot of it. But it's coming along slowly but surely.
Like, you should go to smartcontract.com. There is this chain link technology that they've got, which basically allows you to like jump between different types of cryptography and still be able to do smart contracts in the intermediary. So it doesn't, in theory, really matter what goes in and what comes out, whether that's PayPal in, Ethereum out, US dollars in, Bitcoin out. Like, doesn't really matter. Like, it'll handle all that middleware stuff, and that's like a larger smart contract platform which can like tie in with Ethereum smart contracts, but doesn't necessarily need to.
Yeah.
So yeah, stuff like that. I think definitely smart contracts will have more options in the close near future.
Yeah, because you're starting to see these different tribal-like groups starting to interface and be able to interact with one another directly, and actually do what they call cross-chain transactions and atomic swaps, or what some people are calling it.
Atomic swaps. What's that? What do you mean?
So
do you mean atomic swaps?
Atomic swap is basically like one blockchain's asset being able to be exchanged for another one, and with a smart contract. So you're not having to do it person to person. The smart contracts will actually handle that and facilitate it and automate it. Hang on, I think I got a dog in the background. Let me close the window.
Sure. Latency, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So with all these cryptocurrencies, is there going to be a centralized unit that we can then organize all of these into one? Or is it all going to be
one coin to rule them all?
Correct.
That's the argument. We're going the opposite direction. There is what's happening. You are saying, like, I want you to look at it like this. Ultimately, what digital assets and smart contracts enable is decentralized business models to emerge, to where a lot of the things that humans and board members of corporations used to do, you're starting to be able to automate a lot of those processes with a smart contract. So a really simple example would be, actually, Gunter, do you have that slide that I gave you?
Okay. Before you do that, I have an example. I can drive down the road here in Indianapolis, and they accept Bitcoin at certain businesses, and they advertise that. With that being said, can that be included into the other cryptocurrencies that are emerging and evolving and becoming
the short answer is yes. The short answer is yes, because what you're talking about when I was talking about atomic swaps are basically like, if you have asset A and the business would like asset B, you just pay them it's a no-brainer. You just pay them, and then it automatically switches to whatever they want. So it automates a lot of that guesswork and market mechanics and value fluctuations. None of that matters. You just have this currency. If they want that currency, you pay, and that's the end of it. Value exchange automated. So, but where I want to.
Well, no. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I actually couldn't hear him very well, but.
What I was getting at is because of this ability to use smart contracts to really facilitate what I'm talking about here and build decentralized business models, and it doesn't really matter what asset you have, and it can even be the U.S. dollar. There's people facilitating things like that. It doesn't matter if you have U.S. dollars, because let's face it, the U.S. dollar is a digital currency and has been for a long time. That's what fractional reserve banking is. So it's just a very insecure version of a digital asset, and that's fine. That's just one iteration of a digital asset. So here, I want everyone to look at the slide here. I hope everyone can see it here. If you can,
read it,
you will see. No. I'll explain. I mainly just want the models up here. So on the top left here, you're going to see a centralized little orb with all these little tiny things coming onto it. That is basically, in this example, I use a hotel as an example. You have a centralized entity in business with all kinds of people coming and using the hotel. That was the first iteration of a business. Then it got slightly distributed, and you'll see that type of model on the right, which is actually a model of Airbnb, to where you have a centralized company, but then it kind of allows a little bit of autonomous, like little entities to be able to function on their own. And basically, they're just facilitating a lot of fraud mechanisms and identity verification and compliance and regulatory stuff. And that's basically what you're seeing there, which is Airbnb. What you're seeing now is a completely distributed type of business model that's beginning to emerge because of all these technologies. And that's what you see in the center here is, basically, you have people who are holding this asset that represents one of these tribes we're basically talking about. And some of those people could be people renting homes. Some of them could be people who are just staying at other people's homes, and then you have people who are just kind of part of the network, but they don't own the network. You're basically taking like Airbnb and distributing it amongst the users and allowing them to really directly own it, and even in a lot of cases vote and have a say in the development of it, very much like board members of a corporation used to be. So you're basically taking the corporation, ripping it out of the equation and replacing it with software, and then it allows a completely person-to-person business to really emerge.
So interesting.
A complete direct question for that then.
Okay.
How are the banks or centralized banks going to deal with this on a, let's say, just for example, a mortgage loan?
Well, they have competition now. It's just very simple. They have competition now, which is a wonderful thing. Now, instead of it just being a monopolized industry, there is major competition occurring now, which is a wonderful thing. There should not be monopolies. It should be a very competitive market, and you're even seeing it become hyper competitive to where these little tribes are even competing with one another in an intense fashion than what traditional banks and people who would give loans. But that already started to happen. Like you saw peer-to-peer lending. Well, you saw peer-to-peer lending take off.
On a global level, on a global, scale.
Right. Well, that's what's happening. Instead of it being regionalized within specific countries and borders, it has been distributed globally. The only issue is we're almost in an identity crisis. So it's because a lot of those centralized entities, one of their biggest things was they solved fraud issues, they solved compliance issues, they solved identity issues, and your identity basically became owned by that corporation. And that's actually a big problem. That's why we're stuck with, a corporation gets hacked, everyone's data's gone. They sell it on the black markets, and that's a horrible thing. In these new scenarios, you actually own your data locally on your devices, and then you're responsible for your security rather than a corporation. That's
gorgeous idea.
It's neat. But Nima, I would love
back into. Yeah, I was going to say, to tie it back into what you were talking about when it comes to like mortgages, for example. When I was at Comic-Con, there is a company in San Diego apparently called eCoin, and eCoin is a physical location, so it's an actual physical bank that you go to that handles all the crypto stuff that you want to do. They'll buy the stuff for you. They'll buy like whatever crypto you want. You can store it there. They'll keep it stored for you. So as you can see, that's at least one industry of banking that, crypto is definitely stepping into, and it's going to eat some people's lunch and step on people's toes. And so I think, mortgages are probably next, man. It's not far behind.
There's another one. There's a platform called Salt right now that actually lets you put up digital assets as a collateral for a loan in a peer-to-peer market. So you're just borrowing from other people. And it's amazing because you rip out the central middlemen from the equation, and like I said, we're still in this weird middle ground where we do have like an identity crisis because we're all used to central authorities handling our identity, and now we're shifting over to trying to adjust to really reputation-based identity systems, which is eBay was the first iteration of that, really.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Where'd Nima go? He crashed. What'd you do to him, Latency?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
He poked him in the head, and he just popped.
I'll
Sit
get
still.
It back. I'm sorry. I'm
still.
super interested in this.
Jeez.
It is fascinating. I will say it is. I have a hard time sitting still. I'll be honest. I don't sleep as well these days since I started getting into this, and that's a completely honest truth. Because you realize that these types of concepts touch every aspect of human life, because money is the difference between eating and not eating for billions of people. And when you change that paradigm and that social contract and that social structure, you're completely changing the way everything works, down to the food that your animals and pets eat, down to the schools your children attend, down to the jobs you have. And that really leads me to jobs. I mean, you're going to start seeing digital economies deployed in virtual reality with real jobs that pay better than minimum wage. And that's already beginning to happen. There's games that kids are playing, and they're making literally millions because these assets just skyrocketed in value. And now they're sitting here like, hey, Mom, why do I need to go to college? I'm kind of a millionaire now. I'm going to go start a business now instead. And it's a very strange reality, and a lot of people are having a hard time coping with it, and that includes individuals, parents, businesses, governments, corporations. Everyone is having to adjust because it touches every aspect of society globally.
Fast.
And as you say, there is another bubble. I mean, we can all agree now that there is another bubble. As I think against the housing market in 2008, there was a housing bubble that no one's seen, but they've reconstructed, and it's happening again.
Well, I will say this: you have to look at this and really understand that what bubble economies in general are a central bank created phenomena that they have tried to manage for centuries, really centuries.
Absolutely.
And when you have a central authority creating that, you have this boom bust economic system, and we are currently basically creating a new system that makes that obsolete. So while you are seeing a lot of these currencies boom and bust, it's irrelevant because they're open source software. So it's very different between the Federal Reserve, which is not open source software. It stays there. It is what it is. It's not changing unless they choose to change it. This is like, if people don't agree, it becomes two different currencies.
It's not because it's open source relevant yet because we haven't made cryptocurrency a standard. And that's
you haven't. I have.
Need to do. Yeah, you have, but the general American public have not have. They haven't.
It takes time,
and that's exactly, and that's something that we need to work forward, and that's something that can overcome this. And you're
not necessarily
what work's being done already.
Correct.
Well, there is a lot of work being done, but I will say this, that I don't feel like a lot of work needs to be done to like push it on people, because you're talking about we're moving from a system that did inherently push something on people and you were required to use it by law, and we're moving to a new system that is very much opt-in and completely by choice. So I don't even feel like it needs to be pushed, because if you push something on someone, they're going to get into Bitcoin, they're going to put all their wealth into it, the market crashes, they lose all their wealth, and they hate you for telling them to go buy Bitcoin. You can't really do that to people.
But if you try to tell my dad to go into cryptocurrency, he's not going to do it. And I think that speaks to a lot of us is that
but that doesn't have to be for older people.
No, well, I will say this though. When you leave an opt-in choice for people, then it becomes like, hey, I'm willing to pay you in Bitcoin. Would you be willing to work for Bitcoin instead of this other currency? And like my parents have opted into that. They're like, sure. And they were like, okay, let's check it out, and they'll play these little games that pay a little cryptocurrency. They'll go do an oddball job and fix someone's sink for cryptocurrency, and then it starts to become this very organic and natural thing, and you're not pushing it on people. It's opt-in, and that's opt-in economics. That's what we're dealing with.
What you don't have to realize is that not everyone has such an open mind, and there's a lot of people that are, farm owners and people that own lots of land that live off of, people that farm off their land. They're not going to buy this. I mean, they can barely get DSL, right?
Sure.
I mean, we are fortunate enough.
Stop the train here on this topic because I want to move things into other things, and you're totally right on. And so what we'll do is at the end maybe take some more questions about that, or maybe get into how some of the more details of the wallets and exchanges, or what proof of stake and stuff like that is. But I want to get into what District 0 is and what Decentraland is, and spend some time on that. So thanks, Lindsay. And what I've got is some of the video to play some of this video from District.
To think that progress requires
District
centralized structures to govern and leaders on the path to economic prosperity. Huge corporations, institutions, and governments have controlled the decision-making process and shaped our future.
It's probably too hard to hear, I imagine, for people,
With the advent of the sharing economy, companies such as Uber or Airbnb have brought the power of user networks at the forefront, resulting in lower prices and better user experiences. Despite the obvious progress, the end user still pays high costs due to the fees charged for the service, has minimal say in the evolution of these platforms, and might even have his private data sold to third parties.
Okay. District X0, tell us about it. It's very
it's District 0x because the first 2 digits of every Ethereum address is 0x.
0x. Okay.
Yeah, so it's District 0x. And that's not to be confused with another project that is just 0x, which is a decentralized digital currency exchange. So there's a little confusion there. But
sure.
Did you have some questions about it? The video actually didn't play for me, so I wasn't sure where everyone's at.
Yeah, I just played a little bit. It's hard to hear, so pretty much still need the whole overview. Just really touched on it.
That really dives into... I'm not sure what video you played, but if it dived into marketplaces emerging in more of a decentralized format, that's really what District 0x does. Is they allow people to deploy marketplaces like a decentralized Airbnb or a decentralized Uber or a decentralized peer-to-peer lending platform or a decentralized job market. I mean, the list goes on. You could do like anything, any kind of marketplace that you're seeing like in a lot of these mainstream peer-to-peer apps, but it's owned by the users rather than a company is really what you're seeing this platform facilitate.
And what are some interesting companies that are getting involved that you're excited?
It won't be companies, to be individuals, right?
Yeah, it really is, because here's the way District 0x works. You come in to the community, and I'm a community manager, so what happens is you join our Slack, you come in, and you ask a few questions and kind of get started and start digging your feet in, and I usually direct people to doing a district proposal, which is just a marketplace proposal, and you have an idea for the way you want to create a marketplace, and it could be for fresh food, ride sharing, housing, the list goes on. And a lot of people have put in all these amazing proposals for even governance of the platform, because that's our biggest token utility for because we have a digital asset that represents District 0x, and that allows you to vote on changes and choose what markets that our company actually builds. And that's and these marketplaces, basically you're seeing the community upvote them, and the ones the community upvotes gets built. And we're doing a couple proof of concept ones right now. Like Decentraland is actually one of the marketplaces that are on the roster for people to vote on. And you can actually go, if you're holding the District 0x tokens, you can actually go vote on that. There's another one that is a crowdfunding platform. There's another one that's a bounty platform for finding bugs in software. There's another one that is like a business rating platform, but totally decentralized. So there's all these different market ideas that the community has submitted, and the community upvotes them, and the ones that get upvoted, District 0x will build. But later on, we won't even have to be the ones to build it. We're really just doing a proof of concept for people to see how they can use the platform. And eventually there's going to be a market creation platform that people can just go to a UI, say, this is the type of market I want to create, here's the type of features I need, and deploy it based on a lot of, basically templates based on all these other markets that are being developed. And
wow.
There's one other key aspect to all of this that is really important to understand, is there's a new concept that some people from Consensus that are the developing called curation markets. And one of the district's marketplaces that we're deploying is going to be a curation market, which basically allows, instead of just people blindly upvoting things, they actually have to have skin in the game, which our voting process is similar to that, but there's more market mechanics and software that's going to be involved to make it very transparent and more functional in terms of aggregating information to the top. And people actually have skin in the game, actual money involved. So it's not like going to Reddit and upvoting something. It actually gets more expensive to upvote something. So you eliminate a lot of trolling, bad information, bad posts, scams, because scammers now, instead of just getting free reign over Reddit, they actually have to pay money to actually curate that information to the top.
That's about it. DNT, is that right?
DNT will be how see, a lot of these markets, they're going to be currency agnostic. You will be able to use any currency. DNT is mainly just to help govern the platform. It's what you use to vote on changes, bylaws, governance of how you want the platform to develop. And so the main utility of DNT is just for voting on changes. But it can be used for currency because it does have market value as well.
Interesting. And so that was an ICO, and now it has its own token, and another company's Decentraland. But before we talk about Decentraland, can you unpack what an ICO is, Nima?
Yeah, so an ICO is an initial coin offering. It's very similar to like an IPO, which is like an initial public offering. So that'd be the first time the public can make a purchase and buy in to your new token. And there was a pretty notable one that just happened, which there is a lot of controversy around, and it's called Decentraland, and their mana token just had its ICO just last week. Yeah.
And so anybody can start an ICO, and they're kind of hot right now. There's kind of this bubble, like the old Silicon Valley. Everybody's jumping on the .coms. Seems now everybody's jumping on the ICOs because you can use it to crowdfund your idea.
400 or 500 of them so far.
There have, yes.
There's a Gunter token. Did you know that?
There should be.
No, there's no.
That should be a thing. I can make you one in like 5 seconds. I can just like go Gunter coin, enter. Now you have one.
Give it 10 minutes. And,
probably should do that, right? That'd be fun.
Yeah, you should. And well, the problem is the regulatory side of things. A lot of regulatory agencies, they don't know how to look at these. Like Nima was saying, no one knows whether or not it's a currency, a commodity, an asset. It's in this very gray area because they're used like money, but they're used like assets, but they have a network utility. So it could be a commodity as a network utility. People are transacting with it, so it's like a currency. It moves up and down like gold and silver, so it's like a commodity, and it's hard to really just pinpoint what it is unless you look at how it's being used in general. And that's what's causing a lot of regulatory hurdles for them to give legality to it. So in the US, you're actually seeing people create equity-backed ICOs that is actually backed with business equity and real-world assets, because the regulatory bodies can actually say, okay, that's something tangible. We don't mind that. We can actually we want you to do KYC, we want you to collect IDs, and we want you to have consumer protection stuff in place. And then they're allowing people to do that. So there are US-based ones that are within the regulatory framework, and then there's ones that just go outside of the US because the regulatory bodies can't figure out what's going on because, well, government is slow inherently, and it's hard to create frameworks and new laws fast, and that's just the way it is. So a lot of people leave the country and go to countries more favorable.
I think, Nima, some of us found out the hard way that you could not buy Decentraland mana tokens in the United States. I believe it was blocked.
Right.
My friend Adam J., he got that, and I guess you needed to use proxy or Tor or something like that. Tell us more about Decentraland and the whole process that unfolded.
Yeah, so some people received that error, some people didn't. Effectively, so every ICO is different, right? So every company's got its own way of doing things, like how much the value is going to be, how many are going to be sold, what the period of the ICO is, why they're having the ICO, what are the smart contract things that are attached to the ICO, whether or not they know who their customers are, because there are some know your customer laws, just like depends on like what the ICO is supposed to be. And then also, some people do it to because they're just releasing a new coin. Some people are doing it because it's going to be supporting a DApp. Some people are doing it because they have a new startup they want to do. So I see what's happening for a lot
Some
of
people
reasons.
are just scamming.
Some people are, in fact, just scamming people. So Decentraland is a pretty crazy one because me and a lot of other people really had our heart into it. As you know, I mean, I love VRChat. I love AltSpace. I loved Converge back when that was a thing. Rest its soul. Knock on the virtual table or whatever.
Long live.
And I really wanted Decentraland to be like an awesome thing. So I was part of the community. Was talking to the creators of it, despite billing itself as so for you guys who don't know, Decentraland billed itself as a decentralized virtual world. So the idea would be that there would be a currency called mana, and then you can burn 1,000 mana to create this asset called land. And land is effectively like 1 square kilometer by 1 square kilometer. Seems a lot smaller if you ask me, though. Maybe it's 100 meters by 100 meters. I don't really know. But effectively, it generates this world that's on a 2D plane, and it has an origin point at 0, 0, and then from there, it'll add 1 land whenever someone creates a land adjacent to a pre-existing piece at random. So it just has to grow out from 1 spot, but as long as everything's connected, it'll just create a world. And people have ownership of those land tokens and can build whatever they want inside of it. That over there is their original Decentraland browser that ran inside of Unity. Yeah, on the screen.
Yeah, I checked it out.
And that Unity application was they had the source code available for it. However, the weird thing was they talked about how, well, we actually aren't going to use this. We are going to switch to A-Frame. What else was weird was they had absolutely no packaged
Unity
version. So it was in Unity, no Unity web player, which is what they were using. So this would play on the Decentraland.org website. There's no web player. And the thing that really sketched everyone out was, why were they going to switch to A-Frame? Why were there no executable versions of the Unity version? Why wasn't there like an OVR SDK version for Rift users and an OpenVR version for Vive users and maybe even a Windows mixed reality version? Like packaging this isn't super hard. Like they have it set up. I downloaded it. I plugged it in, was messing around with my Windows MR system and the motion controllers and all that. And I was like, wow, like this is like, it looks way better in a headset. Like why is this not available for headsets? And so it got kind of weird. So I started like looking into it. Then you look at the website and you find out the team, no one on the team has any game dev experience or VR experience. So that's a kind of a red flag too. So there's a couple red flags at that point. 2 hours before the ICO, they lock up their Slack channel, which was, last Thursday. They lock up the Slack channel 2 hours before the ICO. And they had told no one they were going to do that.
And months and months. Everybody's hanging out talking about this.
Talk all the time. It was weirdly enough, it was really the centralized community people talked about Decentraland. The Reddit was like barely used. Everyone was on the Slack channel together. Everyone who was a part of this project, all the fans, about 3,500 people, right? So you're supposed to use this Chrome extension, right? The Chrome extension is handled by Shapeshift, and that is one of the ways you could bind the ICO. The other way is, of course, they had a wallet address. You could do it yourself if you had an ERC20 compatible wallet, which is a special type of wallet that can handle a lot more kinds of coins, namely the ERC20 compatible ones, which Mana is. And basically,
got a little bit of breath on your mic. Just want to let you know. Adjust a little bit. Oh, no problem.
So, anyways, the ICO decides to come. Everyone jumps on to buy in. And then we find out the ICO. Now, the ICO is supposed to last like a week, right? Like something like a week, maybe it was like 9 days, like who knows? But it was supposed to be like multiple days, right? And the price was supposed to go up. So it started a 40% discount and then goes up from there. Within 35 seconds, we found out that basically the entire ICO was over and 5 groups of people total had all of the mana in the world. Now later, of course, more information came out. Turns out that a few of them wore what they call like smart contract pools, which is like a bunch of people buy into a pool and basically it does the purchase. So Bitcoin Swiss was one of them, and the other one was the Centrix smart contracts. Apparently Centrix is like the homie and like sets up like a cool smart contract for every like big ICO that happens. But the fact is, like, the community was like really misled. There were thousands of people who like didn't know this was coming. A big part of why it was such a scandal was they released an article called "Everything You Need to Know About the Decentraland Token Sale." The two big things they released was you either use the Shapeshift Chrome extension or you use this smart wallet. From what I understand, no one who used either of those methods in the article was able to get a coin. The only way you could do it is if you used one of these smart contract pools. On top of that, they had basically, obviously, like the lock-in Slack channel was like definitely pretty sketchy. And they didn't mention anywhere on that article everything you had to know, that they were officially partnered with Bitcoin Swiss and this one other Chinese group that was able to buy in 3 hours before the ICO. So a lot of this stuff was pretty shady. It wasn't really transparent. And everyone in the community is pretty angry. So like right as it's happening, I'm pretty angry for the first hour or two after, right? So I created a Slack channel that a bunch of people jumped onto. We called ourselves the Decentraland Emigrants. And at first people were venting, but the project became pretty interesting and a bunch of people wanted to jump on. And they were like, why don't we make something? Why don't we create a new, better Decentraland, more decentralized, created by the community? There are certain very specific things about Decentraland that really could have made this whole mess be avoided. Weeks ago, like probably like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this wasn't the first time the conversation happened, but like maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a bunch of conversations going on about like, hey, so why aren't there individual limits for like each like buyer? Like, why don't we like limit the amount of buyers to let people like, just like have a chance of buying in? The argument was that Sybil attacks are really hard to defend against. So basically, because some people might just make thousands of fake accounts to try to buy in, that shouldn't be implemented at all, even though that's like what people in the community are asking for and whatever. And that was the excuse. No one really jumped on board with that, despite it being brought up to the dev team and the dev team responding to it and talking about it. And that was a big one. That would have solved basically the whole problem. Like, if there was people doing Sybil attacks, we would just be like, cool, like that's like the way things work. But instead, huge purchases, expending tons and tons of gas, were able to be like these whales, and the whales were able to buy in, and no one else in the 3,500 person community was able to be a part of the ICO. And instead now they're saying, now you get a $1,000 limit if you were on a whitelist that was for a pre-sale from before, which they canceled the pre-sale. If you were on that whitelist, now you get a $1,000 limit to be able to give them extra money after they already screwed you during their ICO. So, needless to say, people are kind of angry about this.
That sounds almost as difficult as buying an SNES Classic.
So I will say this. The problem with ICOs in general is you're basing this off of a smart contract. Very few people actually can develop on smart contracts. It's a very new technology, so the amount of people doing this, it's limited on the expertise. And you're basically gambling between whether or not you're going to get hacked, whether or not there's not a bug in your software, whether or not you structured it properly, whether or not your token distribution model is actually going to facilitate the community and not initial investors and like large venture capital firms, because that's essentially what you're dealing with is traditional venture capital getting involved and buying it all up before the public can. And this has happened with so many ICOs. So well, here's the problem. Here's the problem with doing it right and doing it wrong is there's a fine line between doing it right and doing it wrong, and even if you don't have ill intentions, even if you mean well, it's hard to gauge how much money you're actually going to raise. And if you had like a hard cap on how many coins you're going to sell in your ICO, and then all kinds of super rich people come buy it in 30 seconds, then you're just sitting there like, oh crap, I was not expecting to raise $50 million in 30 seconds, and now the community's pissed at me. So it's not even just an ill intent. It's just everything's so new it's hard to gauge how it's going to go. And some of that's even could be malicious. You never even really know. Some of it's because the whitelisting setup you had was just not well planned out. Some of it's because someone made a blatant mistake in the code. There's so many factors involved that it's really difficult to really do one well without some people that have been involved in it for a while and have done at least a few already, or helped with other people's, and they have a really good idea, or they have a lot of consultants that have done them and they can actually lead you through it and hold your hand through the process, which unfortunately a lot of people don't. They just dive in because they're like, oh my God, I just want to do this because it's amazing. We could build a company now. It's going to be amazing. The VR platform we're going to have is going to be revolutionary. And the idea could be amazing. And Decentraland did have a good idea. And a lot of people are upset because of the way it played out. And that's the thing about open source software. It forks and you go do it another way, and people go do it the right way by learning lessons from mistakes. And it's not even necessarily an ill intent. It's just this is the nature of how things are.
I generally agree with you. I think that the team is absolutely like, they're great people. They're good people. It's really clear after my conversations with them, they weren't at least overtly trying to screw with people. But let's talk about like the facts here. The facts are people in the community did have concerns about how the smart contract was structured, and they just ignored it. This has brought up a really clear issue in, I think, the way that any sort of open metaverse is going to be in the future. And I think we should all take this lesson to heart, is that despite people trying to make a decentralized product, that doesn't mean their organization is decentralized. So you ultimately, if you do not have the actual power to be like, hey, we don't like how this is set up as a community, and be like, we want the ICO to be pushed back further so you can develop the smart contract and add these things so it could be exactly as fair as we all agree. If you don't have the power to do that, it doesn't really matter that their product is decentralized. The fact is they cashed out millions of dollars, and regardless of being good people, they cashed out millions when a lot of their community don't have any mana at all. And they're screwed over to being second-class citizens, buying in and just making the people who bought in the initial ICO richer.
And that's how forks happen.
Richer.
So they get rich immediately and they can cash out, but the system's kind of fucked up. If you don't have a lot of people creating it, there's not a lot of value. So what's going to happen?
People have to want to use the platform.
So tons and tons of people are choosing not to. A lot of people don't want to be a part of Decentraland anymore. A lot of the community already left. A lot of the community has decided it's a scam. They don't want to hear anything else about it. Some of the community waited to hear their information about the whitelist stuff and them reactivating the Slack. I, of course, am giving them a second shot. I've been on their Slack. I've been a little bit active, asking some questions. I don't think there's like ill blood, but what it comes down to is like, do I have faith in their product? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think so. Like I've been swayed so far the other direction that I don't think Decentraland is a metaverse. It was the closest thing we had to an open metaverse. Like VRChat's of course great, but it's built inside of Unity, and that's kind of like fundamentally limiting it in some ways. High Fidelity, of course, is open source, but like the functionality is limited. Everything has its own pros and cons, and Decentraland could have been, hey, this is real, this exists, this is truly decentralized, build on top of it however you want, based on WebVR and A-Frame. That's like not terrible. That sounds really interesting. It's not Janus because it's not going to be able to work offline, whereas Janus, you can run your own internal server and just run off that, which is amazing, and that's like really decentralized. Yeah, I've seen it work. It's pretty incredible. But the fact is, Decentraland could have been it. It really could have been it, and now I'm just not confident that that's the case anymore. I still don't want it to fail because it is a virtual world. Like, I don't want virtual worlds as an idea to fail, and I think that one should happen. But is it the metaverse? Like, no, I'm going to have to come out and say 100% there's no chance Decentraland will be the ultimate metaverse.
I will say one thing, though. It could be made right if they make a lot of very specific moves in favor of the community. And I want to say one specific thing. they are on the roster for people to vote for us to build their marketplace right now. And that allows you as a user who's holding our token, not Decentraland's token Mana, but our token, to participate in our governance platform, which allows you to make choices directly in their marketplace. And you could actually create a system that is in favor of the users and have a business to consumer payment model. And it's like, okay, look, you guys have a lot of money just sitting there. Now you need to build a business to consumer payment model, which opens up the possibility of creating minimum viable incomes for people who are working jobs in VR. And that could make it right. And that is their winning ticket. And I think they need to take it. And if they don't, then you are absolutely correct.
I don't know if you've heard, but on Twitter and a lot of the social media, tons of people were talking about how, I don't know if your platform's capable of this, but people were saying if you're in District 0x to pull your vote off of Decentraland.
And a lot of people have.
Movement. So I think that says something. If you've seen that happen, and the whole boycott Mana campaign that people were trying to push forward through Decentraland immigrants and stuff, if that actually led to people making some changes, I think it's pretty clear that there are people that are disenfranchised. People are unhappy about this, and you're right. They need to do something to make it right.
There is a way to make it right,
but I mean, there are still fundamental problems. We got to talk about the fact that they do not have any VR expertise. Like, how is that going to, like, if I ask them a question about how do you do real-time physics over a VR MMO, which is something that literally no product has ever been able to do, I'd be like, okay, so how do you do that? They'd be like, well, we don't know. I'd be like, well, how do you do like a sword fight then in VR? They'd have no answer for me. They'd be like, oh, we're just going to pay someone to build it. We're just going to like find a dev to do it. It's like, okay, yeah, go ahead and like solve on the hardest like problems we have in VR. Like, go for it. But
that pinpoints a major.
It's kind of difficult.
That pinpoints a major problem in the cryptocurrency space in general right now, is that tribal-like mentality is your camp against my camp, and that is a problem with a lot of communities. And I've noticed the ones that eliminate that and start collaborating and creating cross-pollination between projects actually overcome that. But
I'm sorry, it is bullshit. I hate.
All right, let's hear latency. Why is this bullshit? What's bullshit?
All right, let's hear it.
And get close to the mic because we can't hear you. That's why we're not interacting with you. It's hard to hear you. Like are you in another microphone? Because normally you're okay. Maybe you got to go to.
No.
There you go. Get up on it.
All right, that is a bullshit comment because saying the fact that cryptocurrency versus VR. It's complete bullshit. We are in a movement right now.
I think we're talking about different things, man.
There's not verses. We're talking different. Yeah.
We're talking about two completely different subjects. I do apologize. I'm not trying to be rude, but we are talking about two separate things. What I'm talking about is specifically in the cryptocurrency space. Okay, you have coin A and coin B. These people want to make their coin go up in value. These people want to make their coin go up in value. So these people are building software that's going to compete with these people. Instead of saying, hey, you got good ideas, they're very similar to ours, why don't we cross-pollinate and put those ideas together and make some deal to merge both projects, which is something that doesn't happen because A, it's very difficult, B, everyone's very tribal-like in mentalities, and this has nothing to do with VR at all. I'm completely off topic of VR right now.
I will have to say that VR has the same problem, has the exact same problem. There's lots of competing ideas that just really would maybe make more sense to merge. I will say that in VR, the reason people don't do it is because of financials. Like the financials don't get easier when you merge a project; they get harder.
Right.
So,
which is the same thing in blockchain.
Sure. I think blockchain might have more money and overhead to be able to support something like that, though. In VR, it's really like, if we bring these two projects together, everyone fails, whereas if we keep competing, one's going to succeed and one's going to fail, which
the difference
is the idea, at least.
Yeah, well, the difference there is blockchains are open source software, so if it does fail, it doesn't go away. It's just laying on their table until someone picks it back up. And that's actually the big key. So you can fail over and over and over again, and it doesn't really matter unless someone doesn't pick it back up.
True.
Okay.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, the whole getting in Decentraland, I first learned about it through Voices of VR. I almost got on the whitelist, but they pulled that 2 days early because of some a hacking problem, and so that was one thing. So that made it a bit bummer because I had it all pulled up. Just was trying to get the wallet set up because these things are pretty complicated, to be quite honest. Before I filled it out. And so
there have been a couple other ICOs that have to deal with VR that have happened in August. I think there's at least one or two others. And I haven't been interested in any of them because when I go and look at them, they're either put together really quick. Most of the teams don't really have either experience in VR or experience with blockchain technology. And to me, a lot of it just seems like there's been like hundreds and hundreds of ICOs. I think a lot of ICOs are pretty new. I think a lot of it are just like cash grabs by people.
Yeah, it is. It really is, unfortunately.
They're looking at some of these, their business plans are super rushed. They don't have any product to show at all. They just have a bunch of slides and white papers. Right.
Yeah. You should look at the super famous Eros project, right? So Eros was supposed to be a on the seedier side of what crypto does. Eros was supposed to be a decentralized prostitution platform. And then everyone in the crypto space was really excited about it. Not necessarily maybe because of prostitution, but more because you can really create anything, and it kind of proved that you can make things that just could not exist before. However, that was a total scam. Like the white paper was totally like ripped off another white paper, and the people behind it weren't like legit people. So that's also a huge issue, and that's like what I think a lot of ICOs are plagued by.
Yeah, I think the big key there is when you're looking at any of this, the platform needs to be software first and a coin second, not a white paper and a coin and an idea and give me money. It needs to be
unless you're literally Bitcoin. That happened the one time where the coin was the thing.
The one time, yeah, exactly. But that was a little different. But it's interesting though. But because it actually was software out of the gate, they were like, "Here's some software, use it or don't."
Yeah, blockchain. Yeah. So yeah. I guess it is really like falls within your rules. So yeah.
Yeah, because it has to be software first. If you're not a platform first and then raise money, what are you doing raising money? What is the point?
Well, what about Dogecoin? Right. Dogecoin is just a clone. Yeah, or whatever. How do you pronounce that?
Yeah. Well, it is just a clone, yes. And that's the problem is a lot of these, you had this huge wave of just literally copy and paste versions of Bitcoin with a few parameters changed here and there. And a lot of that was scams, but that's what's interesting about Dogecoin is it was a meme that people bought into because it was a popular meme. So you actually bought into the popularity of a meme, which is why that currency went up in value and became anything. So that actually leads me back to curation markets, because that's what a curation market is you're buying into the popularity of a meme in a tokenized smart contract environment. So Dogecoin was really the first meme-based currency, and it
what worked. A world. What a world we live in.
That's so weird.
It's fascinating. It really is.
So how do you integrate, question is, how do you integrate actual cryptocurrency into VR? How do you do it?
Fairly easily.
I've thought about it.
Yeah, fairly easily. There are a lot of people working on it. I mean, there's several projects actually working on it that beyond Decentraland, and there's a lot of ways you can do it. Really, I mean, you could have a virtual smartphone that is just tied to a wallet on your desktop. That would be a simple way to do it. You could actually integrate it directly into the UI and the software and the platform itself. There's a lot of ways you could do it.
What I was thinking of trying to do was to try to take effectively MetaMask or Shapeshift or any of those platforms and make a Unity and Unreal plugin for it, so that no matter what kind of application you have, you can like program some sort of interaction that will transfer crypto, whether you choose it from like buttons that appear in the air or like whatever. And then that would tie into a desktop application where you plug in your wallet information. So it basically just like two parts. You click on the application, it pops open, put your wallet stuff in, you close the app, that's just saved, and then whenever you're in an application that supports this, then you just be able to shake hands, for example, and then boom, crypto transaction or whatever. You die, and then you have to pay someone out because they killed you or whatever. Yeah.
I will say this: there are a lot of ways that you could do a lot of this, and I think for mass consumer adoption, nobody cares about public-private key encryption. No one cares about PGP, the average consumer anyway. It's hard enough to get people in VR to begin with, much less get them into VR and use cryptocurrency. So my view on it really is cryptocurrency needs to be a back-end thing on a platform to where you just see these credits in your account, and then periodically when you've generated enough of them in the game world, it's like, hey, by the way, did you know this is actually a real currency? Would you like to know more? Please opt in to manage your own private keys, and then it educates you at that point. And that, I think, would lead people, mass consumers, to adoption a little easier, because if they don't want to opt in, great, they don't have to. They just keep using it like normal, and then that would eliminate 99% of the regulatory issues, because you wouldn't have to do all this KYC, you wouldn't have all these money laundering issues.
Definitely.
People would just, and that's what I did. I focused, when I was at Coinbase, I did regulatory compliance, and there's a lot of issues in that department with implementing digital currency in games, because money laundering becomes a nightmare problem, because banks aren't going to want to deal with your VR platform. You're going to have all these business partnerships that you're going to miss out on. There's average people that are going to get scammed out of their money. It's a nightmare scenario for fraud and compliance. But if you make it a back-end opt-in thing, great. You have a terms and conditions thing that you have to opt into. It educates you about the privacy issues, the regulatory issues, the tax issues that you need to know about, and lets you handle it, and you opt in for that. And that's on you.
I love that you made a point about
been done
opacity.
before with not with blockchain technology, but a long time ago with Linden dollars. Like, you could create Linden dollars inside of their universe, and then you can go to exchange and exchange your Linden dollars for other currencies.
Well, yes and no, because I will say yes, it stayed as a back-end thing with the Linden dollar. It never became an openly tradable asset that you can store on your phone. It never became an openly tradable asset you can send all over the world freely. It's not an open source thing. It's completely closed, completely back end, and you basically just have to dump it into PayPal and with a bunch of fees.
But I mean, like, the technology about like having an in-game asset, an in-game currency that you can trade for real-world value, like with fiat.
Diablo 3 did it, right?
Yeah, they did, and it failed.
I don't know. My friend cashed out. He played Diablo 3 for 2 months. He made all of his money back on what the game costed. He cashed out and never played it again.
Yes.
So, works for some people. Right.
See, that's the thing, though. If Blizzard goes out of business, that all goes away. We're talking about an open metaverse that if you make it all open source, you have an open source, openly tradable blockchain currency tied to it, and all the in-game assets are on something like IPFS, which is just a file storage system that's peer-to-peer, then it never goes away. It doesn't matter if that company that started it disappears tomorrow. You can just copy and paste the code and start your own servers and spin it all up and use the same currency again. Never goes away.
So what are some other, and I'm going to ask the audience for questions here after this little part, so please get them ready and definitely take advantage of these guys. What are some other ways that you think this technology can affect VR? What like I was talking about identity. What are some other interesting things? I'm sure you guys have thought of blockchain and decentralized apps and contracts. Nima, do you have any ideas on other ways to combine the two?
Yeah, so on Decentraland Immigrants, we have been looking at a bunch of different successors, like solutions to how to do a really open metaverse. The one that comes to mind for me, what I'm really pushing is, I came up with a concept about 4 years ago. We called it Project Mover, multiplayer online virtually experienced reality. It's the project that ended up becoming Smack It Ball, because, two people in a room with rackets and balls is easier than making a giant fantasy MMO, so we just went with that. But the idea would be that blockchain different blockchains each handle different parts of the system. So there isn't one blockchain that you have to transact with every single time. There would be one blockchain for user login, for example. So that handles all of your account info. So when you log in with your email address, it turns into what your specific character ID is or whatever, and then pops that into your character. Then there might be one for your character's weapons and items, both what is equipped and what's in your bag. And then there'd be another one for the actual ownership of the world. Maybe in most games, the developer will have full ownership of the world. Maybe some certain specific places will be given to people to be made however they want. Of course, that's dangerous because people could just put like a penis tower in the middle of like a nice like elven forest or something. And then maybe there could be part of the application that is fully centralized. Like you don't necessarily need to have every single thing. Like the ledger doesn't need to be decentral and open. You could have, let's say, a PvP section, which instead of checking transactions on the blockchain, which is impossible to do, the 90 times per second we need to do it to work in VR at full frame rate. Instead, you just have a separate like a layer, a peer-to-peer layer that allows you to do PvP interactions, whether that's talking to someone or trading someone or fighting them and going into intense sword combat. Maybe that's a whole different client that isn't blockchain based, but maybe the back end is. So yeah, that's
a lot
one
more
of the
scalable.
many ways I thought about. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
No, it has to be that way. Doing everything on the blockchain doesn't make any sense at all. A blockchain is just a database. You don't code your entire virtual world on a database. That just
you don't run your Adobe Creative Suite inside of a database. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Any other ways though? With music, you thought?
I will go I'll go really high level here. When I was getting into the business to consumer thing, I think there's a large population of people that are disabled that they use VR because they get to experience things that they don't get to experience otherwise, which is really, really important to me. But they don't get to experience having an income and a job, and they have to live on disability. And sure, VR is cool, but I for one, I'm focusing on VR and my music because I want to actually create like a music business in VR and employ people, and that is my end game.
Oh, super rad!
That's awesome,
and it's possible now. It
really is. Well, I was going to open a store in Decentraland. That was my goal. I wanted to be like known as like the shopkeep, and I would like log in and I'd have a bunch of swords for sale. There's like one of the members of the Decentraland immigrants community that he makes swords, and I was like, okay, like why don't I just sell your swords at my shop? Like we'll put it on the wall, and then like people come in, I haggle with them, for an arbitrary amount of mana, and then pass it over. But there's difficulties with that whole process. That's the difficulty of selling other assets that don't necessarily have value. Is like, how does that work? Am I just selling the 3D model? Am I selling the OBJ? If I'm selling the OBJ, how do I give them the OBJ? Does the OBJ go through some sort of smart contract?
It would have to,
like, really. How do they use it? Can they use it in the game? Is their game? Is Decentraland a game? Are there any mechanics? Are there mechanics like per area that you own? Like all these questions are so complicated, and I think that something like an actual like a labor pool, like for example, if there was an MMO and instead of programming an NPC, you just like paid someone to be a shopkeep. I think that's something that crypto can really allow for, and I've always wanted to have a world like that.
There's also this aspect is people are tokenizing. I'll give an example. There's a mobile game called Spells of Genesis, and it's a digital card trading game, and the cards are actually blockchain assets that are limited in quantity. They're actually limited edition digital cards. And if you just took that, because it's open source, you could actually copy that system into VR and have those limited items, and some of them are like creatures and characters, and some of it could even be swords and items, and they could be actually limited because they're an asset on the blockchain. And when you're selling that sword on the wall, that sword is actually a limited edition sword that is actually on a market with a real value, like all the other cryptocurrencies. Because that's essentially what they are. They're just a cryptocurrency.
But someone would have to implement that. So
well, it's already blockchain. Well, it's already built. Spells of Genesis is just using the counterparty protocol on the Bitcoin blockchain. So all you would have to do is implement counterparty in here.
Implement that, right?
Yeah, which you just take. You would just implement the counterparty protocol into VR, and all those counterparty assets, you would just have to say which ones you want in game, because there's a lot of ridiculous ones everybody made, and you would just have those specific asset names in the game that are game readable, and it pulls all that data right in, and you would just have a counterparty wallet in here, and that's it. It's no different than implementing any other digital currency wallet. You just happen to have to use the Bitcoin blockchain.
Sure. It would just be that I would think that in a situation like that, Decentraland would either have to actually like merge in a branch that supports counterparty, or they'd have to implement themselves. If someone else controls that code base, despite it being open source, you'd have to make your own Decentraland that you add that in.
Well, counterparty is open source. Counterparty is open source, so you could.
Just because it's open source doesn't mean you can merge it into another project without the person who runs the project agreeing to it. Right.
Yeah, right. But if the VR project is open source, which is the ultimate goal that somebody should be really moving towards, because that's that world you're talking about, that fully decentralized, persistent world that is not going to go away if a company goes out of business, which is really ultimately what we're talking about here is creating that reality. And we are several years away from really robust, distributed companies actually existing. In fact, there's already some in very early stages that are managed really well, and I'm not really going to name drop. I encourage people to do their own research, but there are some projects doing amazing work that are moving in that direction, and the regulatory frameworks are actually there to facilitate it.
Excellent. So that kind of leads me to a question, what are some of the, for an average person who wants to, get into an ICO, what are the key things that they need to look for in order to tell if it's a scam or if it's a really well thought out, laid out project?
I would say definitely read the white paper and look if it goes beyond just a white paper. For one, there's got to be something of substance there that you can actually use and look at, and code that you can actually dig into and actually see what is it exactly. Two, look to see who's in the project. See who the founders are. See who the coders are. See what their past projects are. See what the consensus on them are. Go get to know them. See what kind of a person they are. Because this isn't like some large corporation. You don't get to actually go get to know them. You can actually just jump in Slack and say, "Hey Brady, how are you? Hey John, how are you? Hey Fred, how are you?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, not bad. Welcome to the community." And you can actually get to know them personally. And that's really it. I mean, getting to know somebody is the best way to know what their project's all about. And another one is if the project will only let you buy the token and not earn it in some way, that says a lot about their intentions. Because if they're just give us money or you don't get anything, that's really? There's no way to just earn somehow, by helping you maybe, or just in getting involved in the project, or bounties. There's nothing. They're going to be no, just give us money. It's going to be well, that says a lot about you, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's good information. Thanks.
And then you don't have to buy anything. You're not risking anything but your time at that point. You're just yeah, I'll contribute to this project, and you get paid for it, essentially.
All right, any questions in the audience? Just shout them out.
Yeah, my man.
What are you confused about? Oh man, what's up? We're having a show about cryptocurrency and also Decentraland, which is a VR project, or is a VR project that is utilizing the blockchain and the Ethereum network.
Is purportedly a VR project, or will be a VR project.
There you go.
Thank you.
No problem.
So here's a question for you, Gunter. Since you mentioned this, you and Pill both already have a job that takes place in VR, right? you were talking about that earlier about VR being an employment, actually something you're employed to do, and you are both in that camp now, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So I guess the only difference is you're still paying with currency with U.S. currency, presumably, rather than like Bitcoin or something.
Or VRChat bucks. No, I'm not paying VRChat bucks.
Tokens.
Yeah, Sarah was asking when they're going to get.
That sounds
VR
awesome.
Yeah.
Would you pay everything in Bitcoin?
I have lived on Bitcoin for almost 4 years now. I was getting paid. It's no different than any other job. You sign a W-2 or in some cases a 1099, and they pull taxes out. You get paid, and it's dumped into your Bitcoin wallet instead of a bank account. I have a Shift debit card, which allows me to have a Visa debit card tied to my Bitcoin wallet, and it just spins it like no other debit card. It just my money happens to be volatile instead of just devaluing drastically every 10 years.
Super pay rent with your Bitcoin.
I do pay I pay my rent in Bitcoin as well. I pay for all my food, and I get paid in crypto.
Nice.
It's the future, folks.
Wow. Incredible.
Well, so speaking of the future, I had a question.
Absolutely.
So I'm a software developer, and I've predominantly worked in mobile and web. And I'm really interested in VR, and I've started to learn a bit about that. I'm really interested in cryptocurrency and the development side of it. But it seems like you were saying when there's, it's very tribal. There's a lot of different projects, and I'm just interested in kind of maybe getting my feet wet, in some of the development
where to start.
process. And yeah, that's more or less my question. Just kind of what would be some good strategies to kind of get some experience?
Yeah, I would really recommend, for one, if you're looking for some. I
need to address the audience a little bit. There's some new folks came in. If you can go ahead and take a seat, you can tell what kind of people are seated. The second and fourth rows. That'd be great.
Yep.
Walking around, hanging out. It's not really the room for that. It's pretty much sitting down, paying attention to the talk, and involving yourself in that. Or you don't have to be here, so that's all good. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have another question.
Hold on, we have another one question that's already
one question at a time.
Let me get this question really quick here. In terms of getting your feet wet with development, there are some freelance jobs, and actually District 0x, our first marketplace that we deployed before we did our ICO, was a job market. It's a freelancing platform, but it's based on Ethereum, so all the jobs are paid for in Ethereum. So the people listing jobs would load a little Ethereum into the job. You would accept it by putting up a bid, and when it's complete, they release the Ethereum to your Ethereum wallet that's on the platform as well. So that's a way to actually get some direct experience if you have already got into it. So that would kind of be the next step. I think you're looking for just your first step, and I would recommend diving into Solidity, which is the what you're going to want to learn to be able to code smart contracts. And it's surprisingly, I'm not a developer, but I know a lot of developers, and they say it's fairly simple in terms of development environments, because smart contracts, you're not dealing with a lot of abstract concepts. It's like, if this, then that, and you're dealing with value transfers. So it's fairly simple.
Interesting.
Yeah, I definitely recommend you go read the FAQ for how to do any sort of smart contract stuff. And I've heard it's very, very straightforward, directly from the Ethereum website. So
they have a great tutorial right on the website. They'll even give you smart contract examples and templates that you can download and just look at the code and see what the end goal really should look like. And then you can start from scratch if you'd like after you start learning Solidity.
Just one more thing before we go to the next question, though. If you're a web dev, I really recommend you look at WebVR and A-Frame when you get the chance. Those are definitely up-and-coming tech, and it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I've been playing with A-Frame a lot. I like it.
Nice.
Do we have another question back here?
Yeah, old man, maybe?
Oh, man, I got a question.
Sure.
What are Bitcoins and how are they used?
You missed the beginning of the show.
You missed the beginning of the show, pretty much.
In a nutshell,
man.
it's a digital asset, and it's a real thing, and it's happening. You would have had to have been here for the first full blown conversation, but you can go watch it on Twitch. I recommend going and watching this episode on Twitch to really wrap your head around it. There was some great explanations that Nima gave, and I gave my take on it as well.
Yep.
All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. What else you got, Bob? Anybody else got any, like, I mean...
Right over here.
Anyone?
Just if you're starting up fresh from start, you're going to probably use Coinbase, right, to transfer your USD.
Really good.
Just depends, or who...
It's an option. There's a lot of different options out there, really. As usual, I recommend doing your research, because investing, you better do your research, and you shouldn't invest in things that you don't know. And there's a heck of a learning curve, and that's why I recommend people go earn this stuff rather than invest in it. And if you can't earn it, then go find something you can earn.
That's always funny.
You can earn Ethereum, but there's actually a big cost to getting into earning it too.
You can mine
you do jobs on eFlance. You can go to eflance.com and get a development job, and some of it's even community man. There's now there's a community manager position for an ICO. I don't know anything about them, but I just saw it listed, and you can go be a community manager and get paid in Ethereum.
That's sick.
So
I see.
Yeah, there's real jobs on there, not just like abstract, like maybe jobs. It's like you can develop, you can be community manager, there's all kinds of earning opportunities. I do actually have to head out here in just a second, but
I have one quick question. Sarah actually had a question. She was asking if she could earn, Bitcoin or Ethereum with her avatars. Is that correct?
By selling avatar designs, is that what you mean?
I think so, yes.
There's that's actually one of the big things that a lot of marketplaces that are being developed. That's one thing. That's the reason I got interested in District 0x specifically, was they're creating basic marketplaces. So eFlance, you could actually go
You get kicked? Okay, so let me go really quick and try to help out with that. So there's other platforms like Swarm.city that are trying to make opaque buying and selling marketplaces. So the whole idea of opacity, most people think like transparency is good. I think there's like pros and cons to each, right? So an opaque buying and selling platform, you can put whatever money you want into it and get whatever you want out of it. So in theory, if Sarah, you made a marketplace for your avatars, right? People would see maybe a 2D version or a 3D version of an avatar on a web browser, and then they'd be like, okay, this is the one I want. And then whatever currency they have set, let's say theirs is in Bitcoin. It'll be like 0.02 Bitcoin or something like that, right? So then they'll make the purchase, they'll put the Bitcoin in, but you wanted to get paid in dollars because all you care about is like moolah. And so you'll be able to cash out, and it'll just come out as dollars. And people would buy that digital asset of yours. In theory, in the future, there might even be ways for you to sell it in VR. Like maybe you'll end up having mannequins in a store. Maybe that store is in Decentraland or some other sort of decentralized world. Maybe you have a store here in VRChat. I don't know. These are all things that will be able to occur, and I think 3D assets are really valuable. As Gunter knows, I was looking to find a 3D asset for myself that I really wanted and try to put it into here. I was looking for Silver Crow from Excel World. I thought that'd be super cool with like big metal wings, and I'd just be like sitting here like some sort of angel of death or some shit like that. But I couldn't find it. It just wasn't for sale like anywhere. Like it wasn't available on TurboSquid or like DeviantArt had a couple, but they were like 2D renderings, and then I never heard back from the people who made it. So my point is, I think in the future, that's something that people are really going to want. I know I would have wanted it. I would have paid you in Ethereum. Yeah. I definitely would have, like, if I knew that was a thing, I would have paid you in Ethereum like 3 days ago, and hopefully I'd have something that looked halfway decent by today. And, that's the world we're getting to. I don't know if that's yet the world that we're living in.
Gunter, I have a question.
I do need to head out, everyone. I just wanted to say bye real quick. Yeah. See you later.
Thanks so much for the talk.
Thank you for the talk.
You got any plugs? Where do you want people to go? You want people
really
to listen to your music, right?
Yeah, just check me out on check me out on Twitter. I'm going to be doing some live streams on there, and my music is, of course, at the Pug every other Thursday. So you'll be able to catch me in here. But yeah, if you go at McMuse on Twitter, you can keep up with what I'm doing. I'm fairly active on there.
We can team up Latency. We can maybe...
Latency does electronic music, so he's wanting to partner with you.
Cool.
You know,
cool.
I have shameless self-production, but...
Cheers, thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Later. Gunther, I do have a question for you.
Shoot, man.
Open. Sorry to intrude. Basically, VRChat is an amazing thing. It's happening. It's a recognition. It's something that's happening in the VR community that I have friends that are now buying Oculus Rifts left and right. That I've talked into saying, listen, you don't know what you're getting into until you've seen it, and they're spending their money doing it. And my basis of this is VRChat. It's not the games. It's not, it's...
Are you going on VRChat, Terry?
I'm sorry?
We didn't even pay you to do this. You're going on a non-crypto. You're just saying how great VRChat is. Well, thank you.
You don't have to.
We all agree.
You don't have to. And
VRChat is really cool. I like it a lot.
That's
the thing is that
it's not decentralized in all of what maybe the metaverse could, but you take steps. Doesn't mean it won't be.
But it is practically Unity Online, which is like...
Yes, exactly. It's Unity-based. It's very open.
I am not paid by VRChat. I am a individual user. And
that's right.
But the point is that, I've got several well-invested users that are going to be joining us here very soon, including in on Gunter's World, the events that are happening within VRChat, the worlds. I'm working with many developers, including people. I know you guys had a people contest.
Okay, man, we can't just go into everything that's happening in VRChat. It's just not going to work. So I'm going to stop you right there. It's not. We're going to wrap up the show. That's about Bitcoin. It's not. The questions were specifically questions on like Ethereum, setting up wallets. I'm still confused what these smart contracts are, anything like that. But I think we're good. I think we've covered a lot. Nima, what do you think? Any other? Anything else with Decentraland?
If you want to get into it super quickly, you could definitely talk to a consultant if you have a friend that's like really good into this stuff. If not, reach out to me. You could hit me up at my personal email, contactnimaz@gmail.com. Coinbase is not a bad idea. A lot of people say don't use an exchange. There are reasons you shouldn't use an exchange. Definitely do your research. But Coinbase is not a bad place to buy your first coins. Buying it from another person is not a bad way to buy your first coins. If you're buying a large amount, CoinMe is probably the best way to do it. You end up going to their website and they'll handle the whole purchase for you. If you want to get a wallet, make sure, I really recommend My Ether Wallet. My Ether Wallet is ERC20 compatible. That'll be a wallet to hold your Bitcoins or your Ethereum, I should say. And then if you want to transfer from Coinbase, you make a purchase into your Ethereum wallet. Your My Ether wallet would be probably the best way to do that. If you are on iOS and you want to have a Bitcoin wallet, I recommend Mobi. These are all the things that I personally use. I'm not giving you investment advice, but it's pretty easy to get into this stuff. I only, to be totally honest, got into crypto seriously like less than 2 months ago. I had Bitcoin like 5-6 years ago, but that's not legit shit because everyone did and none of us made money. So now. Some of us did. I had 2 Bitcoins, and then I thought 2 was nothing, and so I just sold the computer with the 2 Bitcoins on it. And now, obviously, I'm shaming myself, but basically, I just got into it in the last 2 months, and I've already made a over 50% return on investment. So. I'm not saying that's gonna happen to you, but if you're smart, I'm not the smartest dude out there. You just make some good decisions, and sometimes you just end up on top. So, that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Yeah, if you got a decent video card and nothing to do, you can always mine as well. If you don't want to actually invest any of your hard-earned cash.
So the thing is, when I did the math on my machine, if I would have used my extra really nice AMD R9 Fury X and did it all month, minus electrical fees, I'd only be making about $60 a month, which just wasn't worth my time. Having a free video gaming computer at all times was more valuable to me than $60 a month would be. Yeah. So so I did end up doing that. Putting cash in and pulling cash out. It's been great for me. It's worked out, and I've made my ROI. So I'm happy.
Very cool. So where can people reach out if they want to continue the chat, or what about the Slack
you can hit me up. Contact Nima Zeighami at gmail.com if you want to email me. You can find the Slack group if you search what went wrong with Decentraland. There'll be either my Medium post or the blog post on Doubt and
you saw that coming. That's how we get rid of our guests around here. We just cut off their packets.
Just DDoS.
All right, we're gonna finish this up. Bob, you're the last one to do some shout outs. What's going on in your world?
My world, I've started editing our latest podcast. I haven't had time to finish it yet, but I'm hoping to get it out before our next show.
Right on.
Before the next
and Nima also moderates the Social VR Slack group. He also is part of the socialvrcalendar.com. So I'm not going to go through a bunch of events that are happening this week. Everybody can go to socialvrcalendar.com and see all the events that are going on through all the different social platforms. Check everything out. Meet friends, bring them here, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's all I've got. Let me hit some buttons and try to play some outro music. And then we'll be out of here.
What are those buttons for?
Doing intro and outro music. Setting up chairs.
When they work. Things, that intro, outro music, the number of chairs, such as...
Wait for it.
And see ya.
Sorry about that,
Good
guys.
Night, everybody. Thank you, Nima, everyone. Keep on down.